Welcome to tonight's Resistance TV broadcast. Britain's mainstream media is completely skewed in favour of the neoliberal status quo. Yet neoliberalism has brought us nothing but wars, rampant inequality, a collapse in manufacturing industry, endemic precarious employment, an unprecedented post-war housing crisis, public services in meltdown, and 14 million people living in poverty in the world's fifth biggest economy. But it's no coincidence that the corporate media outlets rarely, if ever, offer any critique of a system that only serves the interests of free market capitalism and wealthy elites, let alone explain how a socialist alternative system might work. It's because their very purpose is to act as a mouthpiece for the establishment, because they're owned by the establishment. It was Malcolm X who said, if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. He also said, the media has the power to make the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent. Two quotes that sum up the deplorable state of the British media today. So I'm delighted to welcome tonight's guests who've been working on an antidote to the mainstream media malady. They're behind The Word. It's a new left-wing national newspaper that'll be in newsagents from next month. So let me welcome Phil Wagstaff, who's the editor of The Word, Chris Rea, who's a journalist and NUJ official, not the singer-songwriter. So I hope nobody's disappointed by that. Chris is going to be a great substitute for him, obviously. And Alan Davis, who's a co-founder of The Word. So let me start with you, Phil, if I may. How's The Word going to be different to the diet of mainstream media outlets that we're currently being served up each and every day?
It's going to take a totally socialist line on everything that is possible. It's just this. I mean, we're all, virtually everybody that volunteers to work on a paper is a Corbyn supporter, and we are promoting as best we can what most people see as a Corbyn agenda. That's how we see things. We're not interested in the commercial side of it at all.
Okay, what's your background, Phil? I mean, you're editing it now, but you've got a history, haven't you, in the newspaper world?
Yeah, I'm retired. I'm retired and have been for some time.
Is that your excuse?
Sorry?
That's your excuses, and that's your kind
yes, it is. Otherwise, I wouldn't have the time to do it, because it's. I'm sure that for all those that actually take part, it's amazingly takes an amazing amount of time. Yeah. But I worked on started local newspapers in the Essex area, and eventually moved down to Fleet Street in the hope of making more money, because it's not a particularly well-paid area of employment. And then finished up freelancing on magazines at the end of my days. I spent 30 odd years, 35 years. Started off as a journalist and then became, like most people, a sub-editor. So you sat at a desk. And but I have to admit, I found sub-editing the most enjoyable part of it.
So what is it?
I've only worked on newspapers. I've never been on TV, never been on the radio.
No, indeed. Yeah. Well, look, our media's in a pretty dreadful state, I think, if you are somebody who has a socialist perspective, a socialist outlook in that sense. And it's pretty clear, I think, any impartial, maybe even a partial commentator would acknowledge that the media isn't really serving up an alternative perspective to, as I was to the neoliberal status quo. So, I mean, are you hopeful that you're going to be able to cut through? And I mean, is there a market, do you think, out there for what you're going to be offering in The Word?
I think there is a market, and a growing market. Because if Keir Starmer continues destroying the Labour Party, as he's doing a grand job, for I can see, there is a heck of a lot of disillusioned, as I am. I'm a disillusioned ex-Labour Party member, who rejoined the Labour Party explicitly because I was supporting Corbyn. And there's a hell of a lot of people like that, and they're not young people. I hardly ever met any young people like that. Perhaps it's because I live in Norfolk, and there's not many young people here. But virtually everybody I met is in my age group, so from 50 to 70 to 80 even.
Right.
But I think there's a lot of people looking for an alternative now, and we aren't a party. We aren't a party. We're not connected to any party either. But we very much see ourselves just as a generally left-wing pro-socialist, and we leave it to the factions and the groups to argue out the detail as best as possible. But we're hoping that these lost socialists may be able to find some focus with our paper.
Yeah.
And at least it brings, and hopefully it will bring them together, such as yourself and all the other left-wingers, and they can get together, and we'd like to help to bring them together to form an alternative party. Or to bring, never mind an alternative party, a socialist party, because there certainly isn't one at the moment.
But just in terms of the paper, though, and how that's organised, because obviously we want to talk about media and the launch of this, the word, and the kind of parlor state of the media, and the way it doesn't really cater for an alternative perspective to the kind of prevailing status quo at the moment. Tell us a little bit about how the word is organised. I mean, do you have paid people on the staff? Is it run entirely by volunteers? And what's
well, it's produced entirely by volunteers, but we do pay a small number of professional designers, literally to design the pages. But everything, although I can do that as well, and I'm hoping that eventually perhaps we can help others to learn how to use the software to do that. Because quite frankly, I mean, financing it is a really big problem, and we have to obviously pay the designers. But they are very good; they're incredibly helpful, and they do a fantastic. They go well beyond a normal job. They're not all socialists, but anyway, they're willing to do it, and they're very, very good.
In terms of the editorial,
I've just got a cat. My wife, actually.
In terms of the editorial line, then, that you'll be taking, Phil, I mean, is it going to be? I mean, obviously, you're saying that it's going to be socialist oriented in that sense.
Yes.
I mean, is there going to be a particular line? Will it be like an open source? Will different shades of socialist opinion be reflected?
At the moment, it is open source. It is open source, although I have to admit the political line, there really isn't a political line. It's very much around Corbyn at the moment.
Yeah.
But I can certainly see, I mean, we all have our opinions about what Corbyn did right and what he did wrong, and the list of wrong things is getting longer by the day. But generally speaking, I would say we're very much kind of a socialist left-wing Labour group at the moment, or traditional left-wing Labour group, the Corbyn group. But we have connections with other organisations, but we're not. I think it'd be fair to say we're certainly not a Marxist outfit. We're definitely not into great screeds of educational stuff. Nobody's going to read it. Nobody's interested, frankly.
Well, clearly there has to be an educational aspect to it, doesn't there, though, Phil? Surely.
Say that again. Sorry.
There has to be an educational aspect, though, to it, doesn't there, in terms of the information that you'll be providing, or not?
I think the educational aspect, as you put it, that we're providing is that we're actually, first of all, we're actually promoting what I see as socialist stories that the majority of newspapers either ignore, or play down, or give a slant of their own. And I think that we're there to counteract that, not really to. I don't think it's really to educate people, but to make. For example, we talk a lot about what's happening in Palestine, what Starmer's doing to the Labour Party. That is not something you see in the mass media. And I think the very fact that we bring that information to.
There's an educational element to that, then, isn't there? Because I mean, at the minute, I think, unfortunately, there are many issues, particularly on international issues, as well as issues in relation to kind of, labour relations, industrial relations, role of trade unions, etc. They're not really getting a hearing on the mainstream broadcast media or in the newspaper media. So in that sense, I suppose, if you're going to be giving them, and let's hope you get a good sort of a foothold in terms of readership in that sense. I mean, to provide that alternative perspective will be quite beneficial, because a lot of people, a lot of young people, for example, I know this from personal experience to speak to youngsters, who don't even know what a trade union is.
I understand that. Yeah. You got to remember the paper is produced by volunteers.
Sure.
So it's whatever they feel that they can comfortably write about. Any expertise. I have, as such, no expertise as such. I have a curiosity and perhaps a slightly jaundiced view about politics, but that is what I bring to it, and my journalistic abilities, that's all. Yeah. But obviously, if people want to volunteer who have this inside information. I mean, we'd love to hear from trade unions about disputes that go, but unless we're told, we don't have the facilities to go out there looking for it.
Indeed. Are you looking in the longer term to potentially, having a paid staff? I mean, as you say, it's run by volunteers at the moment.
Oh, that's I know the aim, first of all, is to return, because we used to be printed, but because when the coronavirus hit, it all dropped out. But we've maintained virtually, it's not exactly weekly, but virtually weekly free online paper since. And that takes a lot of work. It's a 32-page. I mean, we aren't like national papers that are half full of advertising. There's no advertising at all in our paper. So it's 32
advertising.
Sorry?
Will you be taking advertising?
Well, at the moment, it looks like we may be forced into doing it. I mean, I was hoping that we could at least restrict it to left-wing organisations, trade unions, groups, and things. But we do certainly have a cash flow problem at the moment. I hate using that phrase, but basically we're nearly skint. That's what it amounts to. But,
so in terms of what, I mean, obviously you're planning this launch, and it's been running by the sounds of things on a shoestring, and goodwill and volunteers, etc. I mean, is the plan to publish every week? Sunday?
It is. The intention is to return to print version, because we think for socialists it's useful, really is helpful to have a printed version. It's all very well. I mean, we have a website which is slightly different from the paper, but the problem with that is literally as you produce a new story, the old story, which was like an hour old, a minute old, it disappears virtually.
Yeah, of course,
So at least have your newspaper, you have it in front of you. It's firm copy, and hopefully people can read it and just pass it around and discuss it as well.
And I mean, obviously at the moment we've only got one left-wing daily newspaper in this country, and that's the Morning Star, which doesn't get get any.
That's not quite our style. We think that's far too.
I mean, how will you compare to the Morning Star?
Oh, I think we're a lot lighter. I also think we're a much better designed paper, but we're not a daily paper, much as we'd love to be a daily paper. So it's very unfair to really compare. It was a massive effort by the Morning Star to produce a daily paper, but in our opinion, it's too heavy. We try and aim ourselves more, let's say, at the old Daily Mirror.
Right. Okay. So you kind of
the old Labour
style then, really, but it's.
Yes, it's very much. Yeah, it's very much. That's the style. Again, what we're looking for is an easy read in a popular style. So it's short. The idea is short paragraphs, big pictures, drama, headlines that give you, in many ways, the headline gives you the political line. That's how we see the story, which is what headlines tend to do anyway. But
and as editor, then going forward, are you planning to continue with the open source strategy that you have at the moment? So it's basically, all comers in that sense. Or
let's get something clear. When it says editor, and I don't remember being told that, but I'm editor.
Oh dear, right, okay. You've been elevated then. I mean,
this is true. This is true.
We were told that you were the editor, but there we are.
I've been told I'm the editor as well. But I'm very much what we actually call the production editor.
I see. Okay.
I just really, because it's a cooperative. It really is a cooperative. We have a weekly meeting. And he who calls the meeting usually calls the tune. But apart from that, and I believe you've got him on later. No, we discuss. We usually have a very close discussion, particularly about the front page, which we really just want to get across a single idea. There's little text or no text at all. But we always encourage everybody to take part in these meetings. Sometimes we get about 12 people. Sometimes it's down to 3 or 4. But as we carry on, because I think we're going to reach a crunch, and I have mentioned this bit. I think we're going to meet a crunch probably next year with the county council elections.
Right, of course,
Because we have to make a decision. What are we going to be urging people to do about Labour? I know exactly. I know exactly what my opinion is, but I may be a lone voice or not. I don't know.
So you're editor, sort of production editor, but you haven't got the kind of veto on things. It's done in.
No, not really. I mean, we can raise a flag about stories, and we have done to this week as it happens. But we really need to just have some kind of discussion about it, because it wouldn't be fair. I mean, it's not my paper. It's not. You know, it is a joint decision.
And this open source approach that you have at the moment, it gives you plenty of material to be working with. Then, obviously.
Yes. We seem all right on that, because we've got about. There must be in excess of 6 contributors on a regular basis. You know, it's not just a one-off, and we're getting more all the time.
Yeah. No, interesting. Good. Let me bring in Chris then. Chris Rea.
Okay.
If that's okay. And hope you didn't mind my little joke. You must be sick to death of that joke about the singer-songwriter.
Especially as Christmas gets near. Christmas,
yes,
indeed. Drive home.
Yeah, no, indeed. Chris, tell us a bit about your involvement. And you're involved with the National Union of Journalists, and obviously this is as Phil was saying, that this is a volunteer-run newspaper at the moment. So what's your involvement, and and how do you see things going forward in terms of the Word, and how you think it's going to develop?
Yeah, we've been very pleased to support the Word in the Manchester and Salford NUJ branch, which we got to know about through Alan's involvement in the branch. And really, it's a continuation of not just our branch, but other branches across the country and chapels, and the NUJ itself, in terms of its positive support for what you might broadly call independent or alternative media. There's a critical point here about the union. Like all unions, its fundamental job is to protect and advance the interests of its members, many of whom work in the mainstream media, many of whom don't, a growing number of whom are freelancers. And there's a sort of distinction between the job of the union, as any other union, to do that properly, but also its interest in different types of media. And of course, the NUJ has got a very critical position on media ownership, which corresponds with probably most people's views on media ownership in this programme now. So it does have an active interest in promoting, I suppose, the extension of different types of media to address the democratic deficit, in response also to the structural changes that have taken place in this industry, the race to the bottom by media owners in terms of price, standards, terms and conditions, staff, the small number of staff now fully working full-time in major broadcasting and newspaper outlets compared to the situation, say, 30 or 40 years ago, and its ability and interest, frankly, in dealing with what you might call local community collective issues. So that's the sort of context for the NUJ. The NUJ doesn't have a political affiliation. It doesn't have a political fund. So in our case, we do not support the Word because it has an interest in Labour politics or anything else. But many journalists working in the NUJ, of course, are sympathetic to its aims and aspirations in that sense. But it's fundamentally about being active in supporting different voices. And in Manchester, and I know the Word is obviously a national enterprise, but we've got we see it, I suppose, a little bit parochially as part of our interest in the Word as a local thing. We've also got the Salford Star, we've got the Meteor, we've got a tradition in Manchester going back to the days of the Clarion, to the Northern Star, to the original days of the Manchester Guardian, when it was a very different type of enterprise, of course.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's, and Manchester's not unique in that respect, and there's a healthy, vibrant alternative media culture around the country, but certainly in a city that used to be able to call itself the Second Fleet Street, and from which all evidence has vanished, just as the original Fleet Street has had the same experience, or to be replaced by sort of heritage and leisure versions of media operations. It's a really important thing. I think we feel it very viscerally, actually, and that's why it's always something we want to get involved with. So practical ways, like with other independent media in Manchester, alternative media, it's financial support agreed by the branch, it's promoting it to other branches, it's offering resources, support, etc., where we're able to, and generally just speaking up and advocating for what is, clearly a really important enterprise. And from my own perspective, I think it's absolutely brilliant that there's a tabloid paper that is lively, speaks to a demotic culture, that deals with interesting issues that you probably won't get in the mainstream press, and it's different to the way in which other independent media deal with and treat certain issues. So it's got a really lively culture, which we find very appealing. And also, it's printing. It's fantastic. It's an act of faith in print media. Otherwise you're heading into a potential digital dystopia where nobody picks anything up ever again. So I think it's great that the Word is doing that, and it's got a plan and an ambition and an aspiration. So we support that personally and organisationally.
Yeah, good. I mean, and certainly, thinking back, to when I was leading school in the 1970s, and and some of my friends who, were interested in a career in journalism, and it was a much more of a secure occupation then, I think, and actually probably a much better paid occupation, particularly when you're starting out now, and the numbers of people, and Phil will know this in his days working on papers in that sense back in the day. Without being too rude to him, I think he's of a similar age, similar vintage to myself. So things have clearly been moving in the wrong direction, I guess, from the NU perspective. But given that this is an organisation, a newspaper which is run by volunteers, the NUJ is obviously not got a problem with that. Then you're saying that you're supporting them. I guess you prefer people to be in a paid scenario, but has that posed any issue? Or just
yes, it's a good question, Chris, and absolutely we are very, very clear about payment for members for work that's been done. At the same time, enterprises like the Word are not unique, and there's a generalised understanding that they rely, to begin with at least, on volunteer labour. And if there's a way that can be remunerated, and Phil said that they do pay people to do a certain amount of professional work, but that's the way of the world, that's the reality. I think there's a difference, and I'm not speaking from a union perspective, but certainly the way I would understand it or rationalise it, there's a difference between something like the Word relying upon a certain amount of goodwill and labour donated to further its cause, to somebody working as an intern in a major national newspaper and not being paid anything all week. That's an extreme example, but the world of unpaid internships and labour exploitation, generally of young people desperate to get something on the CV and start moving up through the gears, is a world apart from helping out and contributing to something like the Word. Because without that, reality is the Word and other publications like it would never get off the ground if every single word that went into it and every picture that went into it and everything else was paid at the full rate. That's regrettable but real. The point is, how does that business model change and adapt? I'm talking in general terms here, to the point at which, Phil, when you start having to accept large swathes of commercial advertising, that will obviously change your feeling about the Word. But at that point, you are a business that is starting to sort of earn money in the traditional way, while still maintaining your ethos and your outlook. I don't know. That's one scenario.
No, indeed. Let me bring in Alan then now, if I can, because Alan has been the driving force behind the Word, and it'd be interesting, Alan, if you don't mind, if you could maybe just give us a little bit of the genesis, really. How it started, where the funding came from initially, where the idea came from actually, and where the funding is coming from now, and how you see the long term, because we've seen left publications in the past come and regrettably go, and I think there's a lot of hope and expectation riding on the Word. I've been promoting it, as you've probably seen on my social media platforms, and people are quite excited about the prospect of a new Sunday national paper going to be in the newsagents, and obviously they would hope that it's going to stay the course. So perhaps you tell us a little bit about that, the genesis of it, and how you see things going forward in terms of how you're going to sustain it, and because obviously it costs money to run an organisation like this, even if you're running it predominantly on volunteers.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Well, the first idea came to me, it was the dark days of Thatcher in the early 1986. And I tried that in my home CLP and was nearly expelled from the Labour Party at that time for even having the audacity to try it. It was very, very difficult because I was in a town with 2 Tory MPs, and there were very few socialists there, and the ones that there stuck out like a sore thumb, like me and my family did. Been in Manchester for 25 years, and it's a completely different perspective. And of course, we've got the internet, and at the very start of social media, it gave us that freedom. And now, as they're starting to crack down on us, it is quite different. So the original idea, if you just look at history, you'll see that the dear old Guardian, the Groniad, started off after Peterloo, but the difference was it was put together by quite a middle class, fairly affluent group of people, and it never was that particularly left wing. If you look at some of the early editions,
no, indeed. So a little bit, Alan, just if I cut in there, can you just say a little bit about that? Everyone watching will know about the history of Peterloo and and what that led on to in terms of the kind of Manchester's tradition for producing newspapers and so on, and the efforts made by the establishment to clamp down on the dissemination of an alternative perspective. And perhaps you could say a little bit about that as well, just in terms of put it in context, if you could do that in a couple of minutes.
Well, for a history lesson, the idea of memes came perhaps from the Presence Revolt and the memes of the rebel priest John Bull that went around the country to illiterate people, giving them rhyming couplets that they'd understand. The Peterloo massacre was ordinary working people just wanting a better deal. In Manchester, St. Peter's Fields, they set the cavalry on it and massacred people. The 200th anniversary of Peterloo in 2019, they, as you know, Chris, because you were the main one, they weren't allowing you to speak, and we had to fight every inch of the way to get you to actually get on the platform. So they're still cutting down on that. But to answer your earlier question on the paper, we started off on social media, Facebook mostly. We got a group together of like-minded people, and we kind of more or less collected as many socialists, anarchists, even some liberals, Greens, etc., as we could. We crowdfunded. We got an original, I think it was £6,000 in crowdfund, and we used every penny of that printing it and more. And the problem with printing it is it's no one's interest to get a socialist paper printed. So the distribution in this country is sewn up by Smith's Menzies network. The Trinity Mirror Group, as it then was, now called Reach, really don't want something that's socialist than a tabloid. So they did their best to squash it at birth. And it will keep happening, and it's cyclical. It'll go around in that. The way we started it was as democratic as we could. We spent 3 weeks arguing, debating, and talking about what name we would call it. The word was not my idea, and we voted on it on the original group, was called Together Against the Tories. And the word, after all this debate, was the name we used. I originally wanted to call it Together. I was outvoted. It's called The Word, and I really like the idea of that name now. Anyone's invited to this. The idea of going forward is that if lots and lots of people do a tiny amount of work and we can eventually arrange it like that, then it will work as a project. At the moment, it's a few people doing a tremendous amount of work and volunteering at work. But there's a lot of us, 500,000-600,000 in the Labour Party under Corbyn. There's lots of us all over the place who just want fairness, lots of people who don't even go near political parties, just want fairness. We'll want to start off with a fair perspective, and they might have differing views. A lot of us on the Word voted to leave the European Union. A lot of us voted to stay. We don't argue on that because if we're going to argue that, we'll take individual perspectives, put the articles side by side, and let people decide what they feel. Just give true information. I think a lot, if you start from a perspective as you want fairness, it kind of helps. And that's probably what's wrong with the Labour Party. I know Phil said about Corbynism. I think we're probably all left of Corbyn and probably always were a bit. And I think Jeremy, bless him, is a very nice middle class guy who's perhaps out of his depth in that. And I think we need to go further. And I think what we need to do is when we get attacked, and we've been attacked all day today, incredibly today, it's been amazing. And I think what we have to do is meet those attacks head on. Don't apologise for being us. Don't apologise for being socialists. Continue with what we are.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
And the thing about the paper, we don't want to be the Morning Star, bless them. We love the Morning Star and even the Daily Worker before that, as they called it. But what we want to be is we want to drip feed the other way around. The mainstream media, the Mirror, the Sun, the television stations, they all drip feed. The Wild West was won by great hero cowboys, not that it was stole from the indigenous people. We need to put the opposite perspective on all those things. And we need to do it in a light-hearted, jokey, satirical sort of way. And people look at very short articles. Again, someone like Tony Greenstein, bless him, will write 20,000 words on why certain things are wrong. and he researches it brilliantly, but no one will read 20,000 words in a tabloid. We need 300 words in a tabloid and plenty of pictures.
Well, this is where your editorial and sub-editorial skills will come in then, Phil, I would imagine. What about on that point?
I think I've had a go at Tony. So, sorry.
No, I just want to before you come back, Phil, I was just going to ask, Alan, I mean, you were saying, you've been attacked today. I mean, just in terms of, people often have criticisms about media output and, they can appeal. I mean, we know that Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour Party, were talking about implementing Leveson 1 and embarking on Leveson 2 and democratising the media. But I mean, will you be signed up to the press regulating body? So if people are, have a complaint, that there is an independent place that they can go to.
No, we won't, because all these media organisations have been taken over by the establishment. So we're not going to play that game.
Right.
If we play that game, then we'll end up saying sorry, and we'll keep saying sorry. So there's nothing to say sorry for, but we'll have to keep saying sorry. And we know what's happened to Jeremy Corbyn. He's like a little kid in the school playground that some bully has wanted one of his sweets, and he said, "You can have it." So the bully's come back and taken all his sweets and then hit him. We don't want to be like that. We want to be strong enough to fight back. So to do that, we need a lot of copies. Last time we only printed, I think, about 10,000. This time we're printing 30,000. And just to say the financial aspect of it, at the moment, we're fully, the way we make the ability to actually print it and to continue and to pay any designers we need is just on PDF sales. We ask people to subscribe and get the PDFs at something like 50p a week. Really cheap.
When will people be able to buy it then? I mean, when's it going to be available in the shops then, Alan?
Right. It's going to be out at the start of January. It's going to be in all the small news agents. I don't know whether many people know that, but if you want to put it on the shelves of WH Smith's or Menzies or any of those, you've actually got to pay for shelf time. Incredible. You've actually got to pay.
Where is it going to be available then? It's in your more independent...
It will be in the small independent corner news agents. What we would do is put a full list on our website, thewordmedia.org, that I think is below there, and you can see the list of where you can go. We're also looking at sending them out. The postage has just gone up again, so for this it costs, I think, nearly £3 for the postage. So if people want it, we'll pay cover price plus postage for it.
Yeah,
but mainly in the shops, and we're also built up behind the scenes our own individual network, because we still, although we go in with them, we still don't trust Smiths Menzies. It's not in their interest to help us. For instance, a few years ago there was a Labour Party conference in Liverpool. Smiths Menzies for some reason didn't deliver any printed copies of the word to Liverpool, but the small villages in Essex and Surrey got dozens of them. So we don't trust that, so we have to do our own media network. Is it possible to share the screen and just?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. It'd be interesting, just because I know some of the online front pages and so on have been really eye-catching and very well designed. If you could perhaps show an example of that, that would be quite good, I think, for people who are viewing.
Share screen here, and I don't know whether it's seeing it at all. I don't know what you're seeing.
I'm seeing you at the moment, Alan.
You're not seeing the screen, no?
No, we're not, unfortunately, no.
No, I think your software is not allowing that to share the screen.
But you were going to come back a moment ago while Alan is just working that out.
Well, I think the software, I think your technical guy said wouldn't allow us to share it. So what we do, if anyone wants to go to thewordmedia.org, free on that, if you look at the archive section, you've got every back issue of The Word, and you'll see just how tabloid it is, what a great red top it is, and it's a socialist red top at that.
Right. Okay. No. Well, thanks very much indeed, Alan. Bill, you were trying to come in just there when Alan was making one of his points. What was the point that you were going to?
Oh, I was just agreeing with him. Yeah. I was intrigued by saying to the left of Corbyn. Yes, I agree with that. But it was best of a not very good lot at the time. Yeah. But anyway, no. What he was saying, I totally agree with him. Me and Alan agree in 99% of things.
Right.
Very occasionally not.
Well, that's encouraging. I mean, the most important thing, I suppose, for people watching is that they're going to see this in the shops, and there'll be some guarantee, I think, that it will continue to be produced and people will be able to buy it hopefully on a regular basis.
Well, the idea, of course, is that people will buy it, and that will give us a sufficient amount of money to keep producing it. It's really It's just covering costs. That's all it'll be doing. And the suggestion from Chris, or not suggestion, but the reference he made to full of commercial advertising, that isn't going to happen, I assure you. It's even this small amount of advertising that we're now looking for has been pretty ferociously fought. The vast majority is very much against it, or they're worried that it's going to change the paper. We've even, Alan and I, we were on the recent. We were actually discussing whether certain things would be a problem in the shop. We've decided that, well, if it is, it's hard luck. And if it means we won't get space in shops, and then we won't get space in shops. That's all. We're not going to start changing for that.
What's your thoughts, Phil, on this issue about sort of press regulation and so on, and the kind of is it in press and IPSO and so on? I mean, Alan was saying you're not going to be part of that at the moment, anyway. I mean, what's your thought? You're an ex-newspaper man. I mean, do you in the commercial sector, do you think that there should be?
That was the commercial sector. We have no money. Whatever they want to do, I mean, it's entirely up to them. I have no interest in taking part in it. As far as I can see, the MSM gives it. It just ignores anything they do. I mean, even the old press council. It was just a club for the boys to attack their opponents and their commercial opponents. Complete waste of time. I know I'm not interested.
So what's your thoughts then, just on the whole issue about Leveson then? I mean, are you supporter of that? I mean, just as a matter of
Who remembers Leveson? Only you, Chris, would remember Leveson.
Well, we are having a conversation about the media, and I mean,
it went so far. It went so far, and then it died. We're supposed to have had a follow-up to that. What happened?
Killed, wasn't it, by the Tory government? I mean, that was the problem.
Well, I'm sure Starmer would be only too happy to get it running again. Same way he's not interested in publishing or talking about the so-called leaked report.
Sure. Where about you, Chris?
The only thing that people are talking about now is watering down the Freedom of Information Act.
No, of course. I think
that stands a much higher chance of happening than anything to do with Leveson.
Sure. Where's the NUJ, Chris, then on this sort of stuff? In relation to external oversight. I mean, is that something you think is good or bad thing?
Well, I think the way the NUJ's position, I think, was best summarised was that if every newsroom broadcasting office in the country abided by the NUJ Code of Conduct, which it expects its members to abide by, there would have been no need for a Leveson inquiry, because they've had a malpractice, irregularities and sharp practice and shenanigans that led to that particular inquiry would not happen if NUJ standards, as respected by its journalists because they sign up to that, were observed. And that goes back to, in a way, the fact of Leveson and any other similar sort of case or inquiry is, to a great extent, a consequence of the slow demolition of standards and unionisation in the workplace and changes in media ownership and the entire new business model. Because in days gone by, frankly, the malpractice on that scale that Leveson was, presumably dealing with, would have been much harder to have entered into, where you have more trade unionists in the workplace, where you have a strong chapel, where you have proper agreements respected by management. So I think in a way it's an inevitable consequence of that neoliberal culture which you started the programme talking about. And the subsequent issues, and I'm saying this from a relatively late perspective because I have not even thought about Leveson since until you mentioned it for some time. And the question of oversight, the risks posed to the freedom of journalists to go about their business and to do it properly, set against the demands of an avaricious media ownership culture. It's just a permanent dialectical tension that the trade unionists operate in the media industry. And, I'm not sure it's capable of resolution. But I think as a final point on that, what both Phil and Alan are saying about charting their own course is the correct one. And probably the only position they can take, because you're not equipped, are you, as an enterprise or a publishing outlet to go into battle in that sort of terrain at all. You're not, obviously, you're not. And I think that's absolutely right. And you can have no truck with it.
I mean, I was quite inspired by what Jeremy said when he made that speech at the Edinburgh Festival. I think it was in 2018, where he talked about, well, obviously implementing Leveson 1 and 2, but went on to speak about, democratizing the media and introducing, journalistic sort of cooperatives. In a way, I suppose, the sort of enterprise that you're trying to do, but actually providing funding for it so that you're on a more kind of firmer footing in that sense. I don't know if you remember that speech, Chris, that he made at the Edinburgh Festival, but I mean, the longer term and subject to, change, because I mean, this is going to obviously require a change in government. I can't see the present administration, or indeed, I've got to say the opposition for that matter, embracing this. But I mean, is that something that you think we should be pushing for, some sort of, like a democratization agenda? And I mean, as I say, Jeremy was talking about, like journalistic sort of cooperatives, collectors at a local level, I think he was talking about, so that, people could do genuine kind of, the sort of, I suppose, well, probably better, would hope, but maybe better, because I think a lot of the local papers were often had a kind of right-wing perspective, but they were much better resourced, I think, weren't they, back in the day when Phil was working on them. But of course, with the the march of time and the way in which the media's been run down, of course, the numbers of, as I was saying earlier on, number of people that newspapers employ these days. That's a local, I guess, at a national level as well. I'm not so sure about that, but certainly at a local level, many of them have gone out of business, and those that have managed to hang on are doing it on a shoestring. And so something like kind of a change in legislation, which would require, I think he was talking about, top slicing the big media giants and, hypothecating that and distributing it around. I mean, how would you think that would? I mean, maybe the word could kind of bid in for something like that, perhaps. What do you think, Chris?
I think irrespective of the model or the mechanism, the principle is certainly in accord with what this union is interested in and supports. And, again, to go back to the beginning, I mean, that's why branches like Manchester and Salford support organisations like The Word and the Salford Star and the Manchester Media, and that's why we're engaged in a permanent discussion and debate about media ownership. And you're absolutely right with the question of how can stretched resources in newsrooms, in sub-editing hubs, which are often remote from the actual communities where the journalism is taking place, they cannot accurately and comprehensively reflect the interests and needs of the communities that they actually should be serving. And and that's a consequence again of the business model. You're right, they are stripped down to the bone, and there's obviously a greater increase in syndicated content in some of the major local newspapers, and the voice of a newspaper in Manchester compared to Sheffield, compared to Newcastle, is not radically different very often in a way that it should be. And was at one time, certainly. And so that sort of cultural local identity, which you could associate with a newspaper or a publication in that city, that has gone to a great extent. And I think even if you were to do a quantifiable exercise in it, the amount of news which is genuinely local or regional in an edition of a local newspaper nowadays compared to more syndicated national, either the entertainment or national news, etc., the ratio is now skewed in favour of the non-local, and that can only be addressed by returning some sort of power, resources, investment, and business model to local communities to generate that sort of content. But I think it would not be possible under the present media ownership structure.
No, of course, no, absolutely.
I mean, but if it were, it would be quickly gobbled up and returned to its original state. So no, I mean that's a passionate strand of activity for the NUJ, and certainly with us as a branch in Manchester and Salford, because we recognise that Manchester and Salford has an identity and a voice, and it's different to other cities and towns, and they're all different to Manchester and Salford, and they need platforms that reflect that and speak back to it and don't just talk at it.
Just on that point then, Alan, I mean, obviously you've been the kind of driving force, and it's kind of your vision from all those years ago, and it's coming to fruition. I mean, it already has been, in sort of production previously, but hopefully it's going to be on a longer term sort of firmer footing now going forward. But I mean, as there is an appetite, I think, now for new grassroots organisations, movements. We're seeing them springing up. I mean, as you know, we're involved in trying to create a grassroots movement ourselves. I mean, and one of the things I think that could be really empowering, in my opinion, anyway, for local communities, is to give them the skill set, if you like, to be able to produce their own local publication to disseminate information around. Is that something that you would be supportive of and encourage, and use the experience that you've been able to gain in establishing a national platform in terms of the word? Is that something that you would be supportive of?
Well, we're trying to do it. We've, although we haven't been allowed to use it for the most of this year, we've offices up in Oldham where two of you there have been, and I know, Chris, you've come up and made a speech there, and so's the other Chris. And we've got enough space there, and we've been donated some old computers and software. So we're quite happy to train anyone. It works as a very symbiotic relationship. We get some articles out of it, and people will get the skills and the subset of skills that enable them to go and start something themselves. And
so people watching tonight then, Alan, I mean, and subsequently, because this will go out.
Anyone is very welcome, Chris, to get in contact at info@wordmedia.org. Get in contact with us. Go on the Word Supporters group on Facebook, message us on that. They're very welcome. The idea at the start, and I think this is really important, Chris, to get over, is it was as much the idea of how can socialists cooperate? How can people who want fairness cooperate without being the Judean people's front or the people's front of Judea? How can we all get together and not fall out? And the idea is that there's a goal to this. With socialism, sometimes it's a very nebulous in the future concept, but with this, people can see here's a product. And we're going to be giving out this edition, 1 p.m, Piccadilly Gardens, Manchester, this Saturday. Free copies, free printed copies of the Word. Anyone who wants to turn up. Anyone who wants to get in contact with us, whether in Manchester or we could do Zoom seminars from anywhere. Who wants? If you've never written before, if you're a photographer and you're not confident, if you need to learn how to use the software, we'll help you with all that. We don't charge for the help. We just think these skills, these knowledges need to be public property. And we hope
so it's very much a kind of a public sort of grassroots service, as well as producing a national newspaper that you're looking to do. Is you're talking about, or we would be happy to anyway, provide that resource of people at a local level. Let me just say, because I want to bring in Sean, just sort of get any reaction from our viewers. But just one final question to Phil. Is the Word on a Sunday going to last longer than the News on Sunday, which was a great left newspaper, which we were also hopeful about? Alan will remember that as well, Chris, before Chris's time probably. But unfortunately, it didn't last. I mean, it was a great left-wing, a similar sort of style, I think they were trying to replicate from memory to the sort of style that you're talking about. It was kind of a tabloidy and more accessible. Yeah, but it didn't last. Are you going to last longer?
I bought. Well, yes, because they got off to a terrible start. Their front page was dreadful. It was about an official secret that wasn't an official secret about how many biscuits.
You're going to get off to a better start, and you're going to last longer than that's the first.
We're already.
Let me bring in Sean anyway, just so get any reaction from viewers for the last 10 minutes now.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Some great chat tonight on the forums, particularly on YouTube. People are really interested in what you're doing, and they think it's going to be a great success. Many people saying that they're going to subscribe to you, which is brilliant. We've had a long conversation about vegan recipes, Chris. People asking if you're going to be doing a regular column.
That's the plan. That's the plan. Yeah.
A warning with every packet.
Somebody asked, it was Nat Sims asked, could you make this available in Jersey?
Interesting question. I mean, do you have any independent news agents in Jersey where they could get the hard copy? And if not, could people subscribe and get it posted? Because I know the Morning Star do that, for example. They have a subscription, so you don't necessarily have to go and purchase it and get it, sent. And obviously you've got the online.
Yes,
as well. Yes. So there is that, I suppose. But would people in Jersey be able to get the hard copy?
I don't see any reason not, as long as we can afford the postage.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. Absolutely.
Alan will be swimming over.
If they want to pay the postage, they're very welcome to. But the post is horribly dear. As I said, it's £3.
What about distribution, though, Alan? I mean, do you think it's? I mean, is it too ambitious at this early stage to say that, you know, any independent news agent in Jersey?
No, Chris. We wouldn't have it in independent news agents in Jersey. The problem is that there is a cartel of distribution in this country, which is Miss Menzies. Although we are and have been, after our last foray into the printed, which lasted, by the way, 2.5 years as a printed paper, so we already outdid the other group. But we'd be going for 5 years. But even though we've got Smith Menzies doing the distribution again, we have got our own thing in place, and we are going through the independent news agents, and we have gradually contacting, listing and working this out, because I think there's other people, there's other more or less anarchist groups who are building up an independent distribution networks for various things, not just newspapers, and we're joining in with that. And I think that probably is the way forward. You know, if you don't want to compete and be part of this spiteful society, then let's create our own.
Okay, back to Sean then.
Janet
Go on, Sean.
Janet Beale asks, assuming I can order it from my local newsagent, how can people find out which newsagents will be stocking the paper?
I'm going to put a list of that on our website. There'll be a list of the newsagents on our website.
Great. And if people are interested in contributing to the paper, how can they get in touch with you to go about doing that?
Can contact us info@thewordmedia.org, or they can join the Word Supporters Group on Facebook. Everyone is very welcome. If they're not confident, don't think they've got the skills, we can help. We can train them up. We can do everything to enable people to contribute, and that is as much about that side of it as it is the newspaper. So we'd really, really welcome these people to get in contact with us.
And where do you currently get your news sources from?
From our contributors. We get a lot sent into us at the website as well. There's a few big stories that we'll be covering in January. There's the huge paedophile scandal up here in Rochdale that the public inquiry more or less covered up, but we've got some exclusivity on a story there. We've got a couple of justice court cases where people were wrongly imprisoned that we're investigating at the moment, as well as journalists. We have got a few people who look into that for us and do the spade work there. So hopefully we're gonna do anything that the mainstream media won't have. For instance, our Christmas edition is about Palestine and about the injustice there. So we're not going to ignore those sort of things, and we're not going to be silenced. Anyone who's got a story, get it into us, info@thewordmedia.org. We will not ignore you.
Thanks, Alan. I think that's it from us now. But just to ask the people who are online at the moment, if you can hit the thumbs up button. I'm sorry if you can hear my dog barking in the background, but hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you can spare a donation, then you can donate to paypal.me/Festival of Resistance. Back to you, Chris.
Great. Thanks very much indeed then for that, Sean. Thank you to the guest. Any final words, Phil? I know you were just trying to come in there, and if there was a point you wanted to sort of make, but we just go a quick round. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes left.
Okay. No, all I was trying to say, apart from agreeing with everybody, was to Chris. I used to be I was a member of the NUJ for 20 odd years, and I held numerous places, and it was a fairly small. And these are the old days when there were a lot of print unions, and I imagine they're all virtually gone now. But I don't see. I mean, fair dues. I still got a lot of sympathy for the NUJ, but I don't see the NUJ pushing itself. It doesn't. When has it ever reported any newspaper for breaking any rules? It doesn't. I mean, it looks after individual members on a straightforward industrial basis. I don't see any political content in the Labour. It's struggled to decide whether or not to join the TUC. Never mind anything else. Sorry.
Okay. Alan,
Sorry.
Chris, and he might want to respond to that.
Well, putting Chris on the spot. I think the NUJ, like most unions, need all the help they can get at this time. And I think we should help them, because without protection of unions, look how bad this world would be.
Oh, yeah.
And it's when the Thatcher repulsion came in 1979, look what it did to the fabric of our society.
Yeah.
I hope what we're doing at the Word is a little bit to repair that. If you want to get involved with us, thewordmedia.org, you can make a donation there. You can get PDFs from there. You can ask to come on board with us, and you're very, very welcome, everyone. And let's hope we can all change society. And the last word on this, we've got Jackie Walker's doing our television critic page. The actor Chris Jury is doing the same on films. Chris Williamson here is our cookery kind of guru every week in the Word. I mean, if you think people like this are writing these columns, just wait till you see the politics.
Chris, you've got the final word then, the last minute or so.
Thanks. Well, I'm not going to use it to refute what Phil was saying, but I mean, we've got different views on that. But I mean, the NUJ is an activist union. Yeah. It's a small union in an incredibly tough industry. The most positive thing, I think, from our point of view, is what the work the Word is doing, and the work that many other media enterprises are doing across the country is about the future of journalism. It's fighting for that, and the NUJ stands with that activity. As it always has done, and I think that is where we want to be, and we're with the Word, and we wish it all the very, very best. It's a great enterprise.
Well, thanks very much indeed, all of you this evening. Very best of luck in the endeavours and the journey in actually building the Word platform. Hopefully, a lot more people have been made aware of it through watching this programme this evening, and one can only hope that it'll go from strength to strength. I just want to thank our guests for contributing this evening. Thank everybody for watching. Just remind you that we'll be on air again next week at 7 o'clock, when we'll be discussing with Mark Seddon, who was a former editor of Tribune, actually, but we were speaking to him in the context of his role at the United Nations, where he was working as a key advisor there relatively recently, and particularly want to focus on the UN's response to the COVID pandemic. So that should be an interesting discussion with Mark Seddon next week at 7 o'clock. So if you're free and you have a spare hour at 7 o'clock, please join us on Resistance TV on the same YouTube channel. Thank you for watching this evening, and good night.